There is a particular skill required to become invisible in a city that once knew your name. Miss Clara Ashby had developed it over 3 years, with the focused application she had once brought to watercolours, to French irregular verbs, to the art of being precisely what a drawing room required. She had been before a woman of some accomplishment. Lively, noticed, engaged at 23 to Lord Fenwick, younger son of an earl, handsome enough, possession of all his own teeth, which had seemed at the time sufficient. The engagement had lasted 4 months, its ending had lasted considerably longer. The story Lord Fenwick told in clubs, at dinners, in the particular masculine confidence of a man whose version of events no one would question, was this: that Clara had been indiscreet, that she had given him reason to doubt her character, that he had reluctantly and with great personal pain felt obligated to withdraw. The truth was rather different. The truth was that Lord Fenwick had discovered, 4 months in, that her father's fortune was considerably less than advertised. The lie about her character had been cheaper than the honest reason. Clara knew this. Her closest friend knew this. Her mother, who had since died of something the physicians called a decline and Clara privately called a broken heart, had known this. None of this knowledge was useful. Reputation once torn does not repair itself upon the production of evidence. It simply stays torn, and the woman inside it learns to live with the draught. She worked now for Madame Voss, the finest modiste in Bath. Seamstress, fitter, occasionally designer when Madame Voss was in a generous mood and Clara's sketches were particularly good. The work suited her, precise, quiet, requiring an eye for detail and a tongue disciplined enough not to comment on the figures, the choices, or the conversations of the women she dressed. She was good at discipline. She had been practicing it for years. She was 26. She had stopped counting the things she had given up, which was a form of mercy she allowed herself. She had not, however, stopped wanting them. This was the thing she did not say aloud. She had buried the wanting under work and practicality and the daily architecture of a dignified survival. But it was there, the wanting of a room that was her own, of a name that did not arrive in conversations preceded by that particular hesitation, of an ordinary future with ordinary things in it. She wanted them quietly, in the dark, where wanting cost nothing. It was on a Tuesday in April that Julian Cavendish walked into Madame Voss's shop and changed the entire shape of things. He did not come alone. Men of his kind never did anything alone if an audience was available, but he came first, and it was his eye that found her before the door had fully closed behind him. She had heard of the Earl of Ashmore. One heard of him the way one heard of approaching weather, with forewarning from multiple sources, with a general recommendation to take precautions. He was taller than she had expected, darker, and he was looking at her with the kind of attention that men of his reputation deployed like a weapon, practiced, deliberate, designed to make the recipient feel singled out and significant. She looked back at him with the expression she reserved for clients who required managing, pleasant, professional, and entirely opaque. Something shifted in his face, quickly, so quickly she might have imagined it, as though her failure to be affected had affected him instead. Good, she thought, let it. He returned the following morning, without the friends, without the performance of casualness he had deployed the day before. He asked, with a directness she had not expected, whether she might grant him a private word. Madame Voss, who had not survived 30 years in Bath without an excellent instinct for which clients to accommodate, showed him upstairs to the small sitting room and showed Clara in after him, with an expression that communicated several things simultaneously, and none of them aloud. Clara sat. Julian Cavendish did not. He stood at the window looking out at the street below, and she observed him in profile. The clean jaw, the slight tension in the shoulders, the way his hands were clasped behind his back with what she recognized, from experience, as the posture of a man who has prepared a speech and is now uncertain about it. This was interesting. Uncertainty was not, by reputation, one of his qualities. Julian, Miss Ashby, I will be direct because I think you will prefer it to the alternative. Clara, that depends considerably on what the direct version contains. He turned. She noted that the charm was present, it was always present, she suspected it was simply structural, a feature of the face rather than a choice, but that something else was present underneath it. Something that was working harder than charm usually has to. Julian, my grandmother is dying. She is 81 and has been dying at various speeds for the past 4 years, but her physician tells me that this time the speed has increased considerably. She has one remaining wish, to see me settled before she goes. Clara, I am sorry for your loss. I fail to see what this has to do with me. Julian, she requires a fiancé. Specifically, she requires a woman of good family and evident character, because she is not remotely deceived by my reputation and has been asking pointed questions about it since 1839. She cannot be fobbed off with someone obvious. She is. He paused, something almost warm crossed his face. Julian, she is formidable. She would see through a performance in 4 minutes. She requires someone who is genuinely intelligent, genuinely composed, and capable of managing a drawing room full of people who are watching for cracks. Clara looked at him steadily. Clara, and you have come to a disgraced seamstress. Julian, I have come to a woman whose disgrace was invented by a coward to cover his own inconvenience, and who has conducted herself with more dignity, in 3 years of Bath obscurity, than most women manage in a lifetime of comfort. Yes. The silence that followed was the specific kind that arrives when something accurate has been said by someone who had no right to say it. Clara, what precisely are you offering? Julian, 1 London season. You accompany me as my intended. You meet my grandmother who will be visiting from Derbyshire in May. You attend the necessary engagements. At the season's end, we announce a mutual and amicable parting, irreconcilable temperaments, no fault assigned, and you depart with your reputation restored, having been publicly claimed by an earl for 4 months. Additionally, he named a sum. It was enough to open a small shop. It was enough for a room of her own. It was enough for an ordinary future with ordinary things in it. Clara kept her expression entirely neutral. She was very good at this. Clara, and what is the complication you have not yet mentioned? He paused just briefly, but she caught it. Julian, Lord Fenwick moves in my circle. He will be present at most of the significant engagements of the season. The name landed in the room the way a cold thing lands in warm water, with a small disturbance that spread outward in silence. Clara held herself absolutely still. This was not composure. This was the thing that lived beneath composure, the bedrock of it, the place she had built herself from after the collapse. Clara, you are asking me to smile at the man who destroyed my life, for 4 months in public, at your side. Julian, I am telling you he will be there. I am not asking you to smile at him. I am asking you to be present in a room that also contains him, which is... Clara, considerably different things. Yes, I understand the distinction. Another silence. Outside, Bath went about its morning with its customary indifference. Clara thought about the wanting she did in the dark. She thought about the shop she had sketched in the margins of her order books at Madame Voss's. She thought about her mother's face at the end, still worrying, still sorry, still unable to fix it. She thought about Lord Fenwick at the clubs, still telling his version, still believed. Clara, I have conditions. Julian Cavendish looked at her with an expression she had not yet seen from him, something that was, unmistakably, respect. Julian's named them. Clara, you will not charm me. You will not deploy whatever it is you deploy on women who have fewer reasons to distrust you. We are business partners. You will treat me accordingly. Julian agreed. Clara, if Lord Fenwick speaks to me directly, I determine how to respond. You do not intervene unless I ask. A flicker of something crossed his face, not quite agreement, but he nodded. Julian, and your third condition. Clara, when this is over, it is over cleanly. No lingering obligation on either side, no contact, a complete severance. He looked at her for a moment, longer than strictly necessary. Julian agreed. She stood, extended her hand. He shook it formally, as though they were sealing a business arrangement, which they were, and she felt the warmth of his grip for exactly 3 seconds and then let go. Clara, when do we leave for London? London in the season was everything Clara remembered, and had spent 3 years not thinking about. The scale of it, the noise, the particular smell of a ballroom when 500 candles and 200 people and 3 weeks of social anxiety have all been compressed into one overheated space. She had moved through rooms like this once without effort, in the easy confidence of a woman who had not yet learned what rooms could do to you. She moved through them differently now, with more attention, with the awareness of someone who knew where the exits were. Julian's townhouse in Mayfair was large, immaculate, and staffed by people who had perfected the art of revealing nothing. His housekeeper, Mrs. Gale, 60, precise, possessed of the information that her employer's new fiancé was not precisely what the situation appeared, and the professionalism not to say so, had installed Clara in rooms on the second floor with the efficient warmth of someone who has long since stopped judging the arrangements of the quality. Julian himself had been so far precisely what he had agreed to be, businesslike. He had briefed her on the relevant social landscape over dinner the first evening with the methodical thoroughness of a general discussing terrain, who mattered, who watched, what the likely lines of gossip would be and how to manage them. He was, she noted with reluctant admiration, extremely good at this, at the mechanics of social performance, at understanding how rooms worked and how people moved through them. He was also, she noted with less admiration and more concern, considerably more interesting than his reputation suggested. His reputation suggested a man of surface. What she was finding, in the intervals between the performance, was something more complicated. She did not pursue this observation, it was not useful. Lady Harrington's ball was their first public engagement, and it was the first time, therefore, that she wore the burgundy gown. Julian had arranged it through his own modiste, a woman in Bond Street whose establishment made Madame Voss's look provincial, and Clara had put it on with the specific feeling of donning armour. Not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because it was the kind of beautiful that required a decision. She had been wearing dark, plain things for 3 years. This was a statement. This was a return. Julian was waiting at the foot of the stairs. He looked up when she appeared and said nothing for a moment that lasted precisely long enough to be informative. "Julian, you will do very well." "Clara, I knows." He smiled, she turned away from it. The ballroom was everything she had remembered. They entered together, his hand at her back, light, correct, the touch of a man who understood that even a business arrangement had a public language. And she felt the room shift the way rooms shift when something worth noticing has arrived. She saw the glances. She felt the recalibration. Clara Ashby, yes, the one who was, but with Ashmore. Well, she had counted on this. This was the point of the arrangement. She held her posture and her expression and let it work. What she had not counted on was how quickly she would see him. Lord Fenwick was across the room, near the card tables, holding a glass of wine with the easy confidence of a man who has never had occasion to doubt his own version of any story. He was laughing at something. He was, she noted with the cold precision that had replaced all her warmer responses to him, entirely unchanged, comfortable, untouched. 3 years of her life, and he was standing there laughing. She felt Julian's hand shift barely at the small of her back, not moving, just present, as though he had felt the change in her and was simply acknowledging it without comment. She kept her eyes moving. She smiled at Lady Harrington. She accepted a glass of champagne. She did not look back across the room. The first person to approach them was Lady Morven, 60, well-connected, the kind of woman who collected information the way other women collected china, with care and a sharp eye for provenance. Lady Morven, Ashmore, what a surprise. And Miss Ashby, my goodness, it has been an age. You are looking remarkably well. Remarkably well was doing considerable work in that sentence. Clara understood it precisely. Clara, Lady Morven, how kind, you are as elegant as ever. Lady Morven, I did not know you were acquainted with Lord Ashmore. Clara, we became so recently. He is very persuasive when he wishes to be. Julian, Miss Ashby flatters me. In truth, she required very little persuasion. It was her opinion of me that required the work. Lady Morven's eyes moved between them with the speed of a woman, processing a great deal of information. Lady Morven, indeed, well, how delightful. She moved on. Clara took a very small sip of champagne. Clara, that was well managed. Julian, you were better. The remarkably well, you caught it and returned it without missing a beat. Where did you learn to do that? Clara, 3 years of being talked about. He was quiet for a moment. Julian's fair enough. He asked her to dance. She said yes because refusal would have been commented on, and comment was not the goal tonight. It was a waltz. Of course it was a waltz. He danced well, she had perhaps expected this, and held her with the correct distance and the correct light hand, and she kept her eyes on the middle distance and reminded herself at regular intervals of every item on the list of reasons why this was a business arrangement. The list was comprehensive, she was very thorough about it. His hand was warm through the back of her gown. She added this to the list as a reason for vigilance and continued dancing. Lady Eugenia Cavendish, Dowager Countess of Ashmore, arrived in London on a Wednesday in a travelling coach that required 4 horses and contained, in addition to herself, 2 small dogs, a personal physician who looked permanently exhausted, and an opinion about everything. She was 81. She was, as Julian had said, formidable. She was also the first person in London who looked at Clara Ashby without any hesitation whatsoever. The interview happened the following morning, in the downstairs drawing room without Julian. Lady Eugenia had been specific about this. Lady Eugenia, sit down girl, not there, where the light is better, I want to see your face. Clara sat where indicated. Lady Eugenia studied her for a long moment with the frank assessment of someone who has long since stopped pretending that examination is impolite. Lady Eugenia, you are the Ashby girl, the one Fenwick dropped. Clara, that is one way to describe the situation, yes. Lady Eugenia, is there another way? Clara, he ended the engagement when it ceased to be financially advantageous. The account of my character that followed was a construction of convenience. Lady Eugenia's eyes sharpened. Lady Eugenia, you say that very calmly. Clara, I have had 3 years to achieve calm about it. Lady Eugenia, and my grandson, what do you make of him? Clara considered the question with the honesty she had decided, on the way downstairs, to offer this woman or not offer at all. Clara, he is considerably more intelligent than he allows people to see. His reputation is a performance and a fairly deliberate one. He is capable of real feeling, I think, though he has arranged his life to minimize the occasions for it. I do not yet understand why. A silence, then Lady Eugenia made a sound that was almost a laugh. Lady Eugenia, no one has ever said anything like that about Julian in my presence. They are usually too busy telling me how charming he is. Clara, he is charming. It is simply not the most interesting thing about him. Lady Eugenia, no, it is not. She leaned back in her chair and looked at Clara with an expression that contained, beneath the assessment, something that was not quite sadness but was in the same neighbourhood. Lady Eugenia, he was not always like this, before his brother died. Before, but that is not my story to tell. I will only say that the boy I knew was capable of a great deal more than he currently permits himself, and that I would very much like to see evidence before I am done that it is still in there. She looked at Clara directly. Lady Eugenia, I think you might be the person to find it. I also think this arrangement between you is rather more complicated than either of you is admitting. Clara, my lady. Lady Eugenia, don't. I am 81, I have no patience left for deflection. Do you feel something for him or not? Clara held her gaze. She chose honesty because this woman deserved it, and because something in her was tired, deeply, structurally tired, of performing the absence of things she actually felt. Clara, I am trying very hard not to. Lady Eugenia, yes, I can see that. Trying very hard is not the same as succeeding. She reached out and patted Clara's hand once briskly. Lady Eugenia, don't let him ruin it by being an idiot. He will try, they always try. Clara reported none of this conversation to Julian. She thought about it for the rest of the day. That evening at Lord Pemberton's dinner, she overheard the wager. She was not meant to overhear it. She had stepped into the corridor for air, the dining room was insufferably warm, and the 2 men speaking near the window had not heard her approach. One of them was a friend of Julian's, the other was Lord Fenwick. Lord Fenwick, Ashmore's brought the Ashby girl to London, did you see? A murmur she couldn't make out. Then Fenwick again, with the particular lightness of a man enjoying himself. Lord Fenwick, I give it 3 weeks before he's bored, it's Ashmore, he doesn't keep anything. She stood very still in the corridor, her hands were steady. She had known she would hear things like this. She had prepared for things like this. What she had not prepared for was the sound of Julian's voice behind her, quiet, and cold in a way she had not heard from him before. Julian Fenwick. Both men turned. Julian was standing in the corridor doorway. He had heard. He had heard everything, and his face was doing something she had not seen it do before. It had stopped performing. Julian, I believe Lord Pemberton is asking for you. Lord Fenwick's expression arranged itself quickly into something social and uninvested. Lord Fenwick, Ashmore, I didn't see you there. Julian, no, I noticed. Lord Fenwick left. His companion left. Julian stood in the corridor and looked at Clara for a moment, and she looked back at him, and the space between them was full of things neither of them was ready to name. Clara, I told you not to intervene. Julian, I didn't intervene, I walked into a corridor. Clara, that is a very precise distinction. Julian, I am a precise man when it matters. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she returned to the dining room and he followed, and neither of them spoke of it again that evening. But she was aware of him differently for the rest of the night, with a specificity that she added, with a sense of grim inevitability, to the list of things she was managing. Sparkles, if your chest is tightening watching Julian try not to care, subscribe now. The moment everything breaks open is coming, and you do not want to miss it. Sparkles. She found the portrait by accident. She had come downstairs for a book, her own room's shelves being limited to volumes someone had selected for their decorative qualities, and had taken the wrong door and found herself in Julian's study, where a single lamp had been left burning and the portrait hung above the fireplace. It was a young man, 20 perhaps, dark-haired with Julian's jaw and something warmer in the eyes, an openness Julian did not have, a quality of expecting the world to be kind. Beneath the portrait, on the mantelpiece, a miniature of the same young man and a folded piece of paper that had been opened and closed many times. She heard him in the doorway. She turned. He was in his shirt sleeves. She had clearly interrupted the end of his evening, and looking at her with the expression of a man who has found someone in a room he does not bring people to. Clara, I apologize. I took the wrong door. I was looking for... Julian's my brother. She stopped. Julian, the portrait, his name was Edmund, he died 4 years ago. He crossed to the fireplace and stood beside her, looking up at the portrait with the particular quality of attention you give to things that are simultaneously unbearable and necessary. Julian, he was 22, fever. It was quick, the physician said, as though the speed of it was relevant. He was quiet for a moment. Julian, he was considerably better than me in most of the ways that matter, kinder, more honest. He actually meant the things he said, which was not a quality we shared at the time. Clara, and now. He looked at her sideways. Julian, now I mean more things than I used to. I simply say fewer of them. She turned to face the portrait again. She understood, with the instinct she had for hidden architectures, for the structures people build inside themselves when the outside has failed them, that she was looking at the answer to several questions she had been gathering about him. The performance, the careful maintenance of a reputation that kept people at a specific distance, the charm deployed like a wall rather than a welcome. He had lost the person who knew him, and then he had ensured that no one else could. Clara, he would not like the reputation you've built. Julian, no, he would be very tiresome about it. He was relentlessly optimistic about people, which I always found exhausting and now find. He stopped. Julian, enviable, I find it enviable now. A pause, the candle between them, the portrait above. Clara, my mother died 18 months after the engagement ended. The physician said it was her heart. I think the heart was simply the most honest organ available. He looked at her. Clara, I am telling you because you told me something true. It seemed fair. Julian's Clara. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. She noticed this precisely, the way she noticed all precise things. Julian, I'm sorry, about your mother, about all of it. Clara, you didn't do it. Julian, no, but I've been in rooms where it was discussed and said nothing. Men like me are always in those rooms. We are always saying nothing. The silence was the specific kind that arrives when something has been admitted that cannot be taken back. She did not fill it. She let it sit between them and occupy its proper space. Then she said good night, and went to find her book, and lay awake for 2 hours namming every feeling she was having with clinical accuracy and refusing to do anything with any of them. The list, she noted, was getting longer. Lord Fenwick cornered her at Lady Ashworth's garden party on a Saturday afternoon. Not cornered, that was too strong a word for what he did. He simply appeared at her side with a glass of lemonade he had not been asked for, and a smile that had not changed in 3 years, and said, Lord Fenwick, Clara, you are looking very well, London agrees with you. She turned, she looked at him. She took a breath that she converted, by the time it reached the surface, into a completely neutral expression. Clara, Lord Fenwick. Lord Fenwick, I confess I was surprised to see you in town. With Ashmore no less, he is well, you always were ambitious. The word ambitious was doing the same work the word remarkable had done at Lady Harrington's ball, carrying a cargo of implication dressed as a compliment. She understood his language precisely. She had studied it for 4 months. Clara, he is also standing approximately 15 feet behind you, so you may want to manage your next sentence carefully. Fenwick turned. Julian was indeed 15 feet away, in conversation with 2 men, but his eyes were on this corner of the garden with an attention that was not casual. Fenwick turned back. His smile had acquired a slight tension. Lord Fenwick, I meant nothing by it, simply remarking that it is good to see you thriving. Clara, yes, I am sure that is all you meant. She looked at him for a moment. She had been waiting, she understood now, standing here for 3 years for this moment. The moment of being in the same room as him with enough ground under her feet to stand on. She had imagined various versions of it. Anger, primarily. The clean, clarifying burn of it. What she felt instead was something quieter and in its own way more devastating, a complete absence of fear. She was not afraid of him. She had been afraid of him, afraid of what he could still do, afraid of the power of his version of events, and standing here, with his slight tension and his managed smile and his eyes sliding toward Julian, she understood that she had outgrown the fear without noticing. Clara, I want to be clear about something. Not for your sake, you have never once considered mine, so I see no reason to return the favor. But for my own, I know what you did, I know why you did it. And I know that you have lived for 3 years in the comfortable certainty that your account of events is the one that stands. She held his gaze. Clara, I am back in London. I intend to stay. And the account of events that stands from this point forward will not be yours. She turned and walked toward the roses at the far end of the garden, and did not look back, and did not see, because she was not looking, Julian Cavendish watching her cross that garden with an expression that was not performance and not charm, and not any of the social instruments he had spent 14 years perfecting. It was simply a man seeing someone clearly, perhaps for the first time, and finding that clarity more alarming and more necessary than anything he had previously encountered. He found her at the roses. Julian, I stayed where I was, as you asked. Clara, you did, thank you. Julian, what did you say to him? Clara, the truth, at a conversational volume. He looked at her profile. She was looking at the roses with an expression that was not the composed mask she usually wore, but something behind it. Something that was both resolution and the particular exhaustion of someone who has just done something they needed to do for a very long time. Julian, are you all right? Clara, remarkably, yes. He was quiet for a moment, then. Julian, I should have said something, in those rooms, 3 years ago. Men like me are always in those rooms, I said, and it is true I was in those rooms and I said nothing, and it contributed to. Clara, Julian's. He stopped. Clara, you were not in those rooms for me, you did not know me, you had no particular obligation. Julian, I had a general one, to decency. Clara, yes, well, we've established that decency has historically been in short supply among men who did know me and had specific obligations. I am not disposed to hold its absence against men who had none. He looked at her, she looked at the roses. Julian, Clara. Clara, don't. Julian, you don't know what I was going to say. Clara, I know exactly what you were going to say. I have been carefully not thinking about it for 6 weeks. A silence, then very quietly. Julian, and how is that going? Clara, extremely poorly. She found him in the library at midnight, 3 days later. She had not meant to come down. She had been in bed, conducting the interior argument she had been conducting for 6 weeks with increasing exhaustion and decreasing conviction. And she had finally reached the point, the specific threshold where discipline costs more than it saves, and she had put on her dressing gown and come downstairs. He was at his desk. There was a letter in front of him written, she could see from the doorway, and not sent. He looked up when she entered and did not seem surprised, which suggested he had been expecting her or expecting something for some time. Clara, what is the letter? Julian, to my solicitor, regarding the end of our arrangement. She went very still. Julian, not. He stood up, ran a hand through his hair in the unguarded way she had only seen from him late at night, when he had stopped curating himself. Julian, not dismissing you, the opposite. It was an attempt to. He stopped. Then, with the self-aware frustration of a man who has just discovered he is inarticulate on the only subject that currently matters. Julian, I was trying to arrange to release you from the arrangement. The end of season announcement, the amicable parting, I was going to do it now early so that whatever happens next for you, it is not contingent on me. So that you are not.
Clara trapped.
Julian, I was going to say obligated, but yes. She looked at him across the library. The lamp threw his shadow long against the shelves. Clara, Julian, why did you not simply court me honestly? The question landed in the room with a quietness that belied its weight. He looked at her for a moment, the real look, the one without the charm and the performance, and she thought she had never seen him look quite so much like the portrait in the study. Like someone who has not yet learned to protect himself from the openness of his own face. Julian, because you would have said no.
Clara, obviously.
Julian, because I have a reputation that I earned and you had every reason to apply it to me personally, and because I am not Edmund. I am not someone who inspires straightforward trust. I have spent 14 years ensuring that I am not.
Clara, why?
He was quiet for a long moment. Julian, because Edmund trusted everything. He trusted the world to be as good as he was, and the world gave him a fever at 22 and that was the end of it. And I decided, not consciously, not all at once, that the thing he had been, the open thing, the undefended thing, that it was not survivable, that the performance was safer, that if you did not let anyone in you could not be.
He stopped her.
Julian, you cannot be left. If you never let anyone in, you cannot be left. Clara crossed the room. She stood before him, closer than their arrangement had ever placed them without an audience, and looked at him with the full attention she gave to things she had decided deserved it. Clara, I have spent 3 years making myself small enough that no one could take anything else from me. I called it practicality. I called it dignity. I called it a sensible response to experience. She held his gaze. Clara, it is also survivable. It is simply not a life. I would like a life, Julian, I think you would too. He looked at her for a long moment, then. Julian, if I say what I am about to say and you do not, if the answer is no, the arrangement ends cleanly as agreed. Your money, your name, no claim on anything further.
Clara, say it.
Julian, I am in love with you. I have been, I think, since you looked at me in Madame Voss's shop as though my reputation were mildly interesting and entirely irrelevant. I did not recognize it immediately because I have been extremely thorough about not feeling things of this kind. I recognize it now. He took her hand, carefully, as though it was something he was not certain he had permission for. Julian, I am not Edmund. I will not always be as good as this moment. I will sometimes retreat into the performance because it is easier, and I think I will require someone who finds the performance as unpersuasive as you do.
Clara, that is the most accurate self-assessment I have ever heard from anyone.
Julian, is it a yes? She looked at their joined hands. She thought about the wanting she had done in the dark for 3 years, the quiet, careful wanting of a life with ordinary things in it. She thought about the shop sketched in the margins of her order books. She thought about her mother's face. She thought about Edmund in the portrait, his open expression, his confidence in the world's goodness. She thought, I would like to try that, the openness, once more, with someone who has told me honestly exactly where he is likely to fail and why. Clara, it is a yes, with the condition that when you retreat into the performance, I am permitted to find it as unpersuasive as I do and say so directly. Julian, that is yes, that is Clara. He said her name the way someone says a word they have been turning over in private for weeks, and are now finally allowed to say aloud. She put her free hand against his jaw, the clean jaw, the carefully maintained face of a man who has been performing for 14 years, and felt him exhale slowly, like something long held being set down. He kissed her. It was not a performance. It was the real thing, the underneath thing, the thing he had been keeping back from his face for 6 weeks, and it was, she noted, in the last coherent thought she had for some time, considerably better than she had been trying not to imagine. The shop opened in October, on a Thursday, during a light rain that Madame Voss said was good luck and Julian said was Bath being characteristically honest about its climate. It was not a large shop. It was exactly the size Clara had sketched in the margins of order books for 3 years. A ground floor workroom, 2 fitting rooms, a small window display on the main street, a flat above where the proprietor lived with considerably more comfort than a seamstress in Bath had previously been able to arrange. The proprietor was, the sign announced, Miss Clara Ashby, Not Lady Ashmore, she had been clear about this, and Julian, who had long since abandoned trying to win arguments with her on matters of principle, had been clear about respecting it. She was Clara Ashby. She had rebuilt that name herself, and she intended to keep it. She was also, privately and in all the ways that mattered, entirely his. These two things were not contradictions. She had decided they were not contradictions, and the decision felt each morning more obviously correct. Lady Eugenia had not died. She had, in fact, rallied with what her physician described as medically improbable determination upon learning of the engagement, and had since written 3 letters to Clara containing advice about managing Julian that Clara found largely accurate and occasionally alarming. She had also sent a bolt of extraordinarily expensive blue silk with a note that read, "For the wedding clothes, whenever you are ready, no rush, I am 81, so perhaps some mild urgency would not be inappropriate." Clara had laughed for the first time in longer than she could calculate and written back immediately. Julian came in through the back on the morning of the opening, carrying 2 cups of tea, wearing an expression that was not his social face and had not been, she noticed, for several months now. The performance still existed. He deployed it when required with all his old proficiency. But it came off at the end of the evening the way a coat comes off, easily without ceremony, because there was someone to take it from him. "Julian, Lady Morven is outside. She appears to be reading the sign." "Clara, she will come in. She has been waiting for an excuse since May." "Julian, she is going to ask you an enormous number of questions." "Clara, yes, and I am going to answer them in ways that are both true and entirely sufficient, which is a skill I have been practicing for some time now." He handed her the tea. Their fingers overlapped on the cup, and he did not immediately let go, which was a habit he had developed and she had not attempted to correct. "Julian, are you glad of all of it?" She considered the question with the honesty she had always given difficult things. "Clara, I am glad of most of it. The parts I am not glad of made the parts I am glad of possible, which is either a very comforting thought or a deeply inconvenient one, depending on the morning." "Julian, which morning is this?" "Clara, a comforting one." He smiled, not the performance smile, the other one, the one that arrived without architecture, the one she suspected she was the primary cause of. She had stopped managing her response to it somewhere around the 4th week of the arrangement, and had not resumed. Lord Fenwick had left London in July. She did not know where he had gone and found, to her own mild surprise, that she did not care with any particular energy. The wanting of his reckoning, which had been a low constant note in her life for 3 years, had resolved itself into something quieter. The simple fact of her own continued existence, her own rebuilding, her own ordinary and specifically wanted future. She did not forgive him. She did not need to. She had simply moved far enough away from the damage that it had stopped defining the shape of the view. Outside the shop window, Bath went about its morning in the rain. Lady Morven was still studying the sign. A carriage passed. The rain fell at its customary angle. Clara Ashby, 26, proprietor, recently and quietly betrothed, stood in the workroom of the shop she had sketched in margins for 3 years and drank her tea and felt, without performance, without management, without the careful architecture of containment, entirely and simply well. It was, she thought, the most radical thing she had ever done. Sparkles, if Clara's story stayed with you, subscribe for the next full audiobook, like if you want Julian's POV chapter, and comment below which moment broke you first. Sparkles.